With Season 2 of DanDaDan just around the corner at the time of this video's release, I wanted to bring to the table a topic that not only recaps and refreshes the story and its characters for you, my dear viewer, but also isn't the kind of slop that I would used to make here on the channel for recaps. This video serves as a video to recap, but also accurately captures the essence of why DanDaDan's first half is so good, why it is so popular, and why Okarun farting in Momo's face is still the funniest piece of shit ever written. One day, Momo sees Okarun being bullied, and because of our expectations of what popular girls do in school life at that age, we think to ourselves that Momo, the prettiest and most popular dum-de-dum in school, would never associate or have a single thing in common with someone like Okarun. After all, she likes the Ken Takakura type, who is a real-life and beloved Japanese celebrity known for his stoic and manly appearance, seen by an entire generation of men and women alike as the perfect type. The expectation, though, is further rejection. Momo rejects Okarun. Okarun stays the same stagnant person he was the previous days. But instead, Momo reveals one of the key aspects of her character, her profound decency towards others. Seriously, this is one of the most attractive aspects of Momo's personality. She sees someone being kicked, and instead of scoffing it off as if she is above it, she instead acts upon it and extends her hand. Not because she is this goddess gracing the peasants with her time, but because it is the right thing to do, and it is something that she personally relates with. But what she wouldn't realize is this would open up Pandora's box. The attention-starved Okarun immediately begins to grow closer to Momo and feels comfortable enough to share his own interests: UAP, UFO, alien, and governmental conspiracy, as he so proudly shows Momo. Momo, on the other hand, believes this to be preposterous, and such things do not exist. And at first, this seems logical, but much like the current scenario is a subversion itself. Tatsu decides to double down once again and present Momo as the most logical of them both. She believes in spirits. That's right, the relationship between our two main characters is in of itself a representation of the main conflict of the series, aliens versus ghosts. This is pretty smart because by using this conflict in particular, Tatsu is able to have these characters something to latch onto and create something really fun out of it. Momo is too brash, she's too prideful to let it go, and Okarun is just the same. So they dare each other to prove their preferred conspiracy theory to be true, and whoever the loser is, they must become the other's gopher, not realizing that this entire scenario is ridiculous. Because in a normal world, they'd both be proven wrong and thus would serve as each other's gophers. Well, turns out Tatsu landed on something really smart here. It doesn't matter what turns out to be true, because they are proved right, leading to the same outcome anyways. A bit of fate or just blind luck on Tatsu's part? Who knows? This eventually leads to the climax of the first episode that has become legendary. Okarun is possessed by the evil spirit of Turbo Granny, who is based on the real-life folklore and yokai, in which those speeding in their cars would get a visit from Turbo Baba, the traffic control officer, I guess? If you think about it. In this show, she's a little bit different, taking on a more traditional Japanese appearance of Turbo Baba, and she is known simply as Turbo Granny, the English translation of Baba. On the flip side, Momo proves herself wrong by being abducted by aliens in an uncomfortable but ultimately highly memorable and insanely awesome moment in which Okarun and Momo unlock their true potential and save one another. Okarun gets possessed by Turbo Granny and Momo's powers awaken, allowing to control the evil Big Biddy inside Okarun. The perfect complement sandwich, if you will. Which is exactly the message of the first episode. You can find commonality within those who seem different. You just have to open yourself up to the possibilities of what may seem impossible. A Gyaru can fall in love with a nerd. Aliens and spirits do exist. You just have to open up your mind to those possibilities, and sometimes what may seem illogical becomes reality. So, with Momo in a dilemma over Okarun being named Kin Takakura, she instead gives him the name Okarun. However, upon arriving at Momo's house, they pass through the Torii gate that has a warding talisman, so he hilariously is thrown into a ditch and then given an impromptu old lady perm, which Momo laughs at. But there is something even worse. Okarun panics as he's lost his Kintama, to which Momo reminds him what led to this. So Okarun, fearing that he may be on the verge of losing his only friend, tells Momo how he feels. Momo then points out his self-isolation. He is constantly pushing people away unintentionally to protect his own heart, despite being lonely and wanting to have friends. It's a contradiction, but one I think is all too common in today's world nonetheless. In other words, it's relatable. So Okarun tears up and farts in her face. But there is a knock at the door, and it's an evil spirit, which leads to a fight against the Flatwoods monster. Its powers are very interesting in that it encases the entire property in a concrete cube or an alternate space. It also causes them nosebleeds as well, as the giant alien demands their banana organs. This is when Okarun's yokai powers awaken, which is possible due to Momo controlling the curse within Okarun using her own awakened powers from episode 1. So Okarun unleashes hell on the Flatwood monster. But there are limits. His body is the limit, as he coughs up blood. Realizing this isn't working, Momo thinks of another plan and notices the monster fights as if it were a sumo wrestler, and so they quickly put together a new plan of offense. Momo uses a dual-handed suppressions technique, which allows Okarun to destroy the monster's leg, while her other hand pulls the monster down to deal with its hand. But what they didn't know is it can regrow its limbs, and proceeds to slam Momo into the wall, repeatedly punching her until she is but a Momo pancake. However, this allows Momo to reattach the talisman because she in reality planned to use her predicament to do exactly what she does here. This causes the defeat of the Flatwood monster, and in the aftermath, they both appreciate each other and are able to bond. That is until Momo collapses from exhaustion, allowing Okarun to succumb to Turbo Granny's curse. Enter Santa Dodoria, the Bayonetta-looking, bomber jacket-wearing, and bat-swinging grandmother of Momo, Seiko Ayase. She steps up against Turbo Granny and puts her in her place using her dual barriers, trapping Turbo Granny. Each time she crosses the barrier, she burns. Seiko also shows her resolve and her love for Momo when Turbo Granny threatens killing her will kill the boy, and she doesn't care because she hurt Momo, calling her bluff. This, along with telling the taxi driver to leave before arriving at her home, is an example of Seiko's compassion for others. Yeah, she's a badass, but she isn't a dick, so she deals with Turbo Granny once and for all. Kinda. Momo awakens in a panic and comes downstairs to find Seiko belly laughing at Bakatono, her favorite TV show. Her immediate worries isn't her grandmother, but actually Okarun, who is alive inside the shrine, as she opens the door to find Okarun overjoyed that she is okay. Momo, having a patent tsundere moment over her uwu-owo boyfriend, slams the door on him, in his face really, and this leads to their plan to save Okarun, which is to beat Turbo Granny at her own game, which is a race. Training, Okarun tests his own resolve by apologizing for being weak, and Momo channels her inner Kin Takakura to save Okarun, showing that it is actually Momo, a female who is more inspired by Kin than even Okarun is. Momo, however, reassures and supports Okarun, letting him know that despite what happened before, she is here to support him. So as Momo trains by latching onto auras, she learns to use her touch over her sight to feel and control the curse. As well, Okarun struggles with Turbo Granny's curse as it overwhelms him. Eventually, it doesn't matter if they are prepared or not. Turbo Granny decides that tonight they are to fight in the tunnel, or she will kill everyone. To properly prepare them, Seiko gives them spirit-resistant outfits and hugs Momo tightly, showing that they are mending the broken bridge between the two, and even after all Momo has said, Seiko is more than willing to help her because she loves her as a daughter. While Momo initially believes this battle to be easier than the Flatwoods monster, what actually happens is nothing but. Luring Turbo Granny out, they challenge her to a game of tag with a 10-second head start. She lies, and immediately counts wrong on purpose, and this drags Momo directly into harm's way. But they are able to eventually weaken her, which begins a long chase sequence with Turbo Granny, who controls the Earthbound Spirit Crab. So, while running through the streets with the civilians unable to see any of what is happening, they lure the crab into a hot spring where they use boiling water to tighten its muscles, which slows it down. Now, without a crab to do her battles for her, Turbo Granny possesses citizens to block their escape. Using the Turbo Granny curse, Okarun and Momo lure them to their ultimate trap, the final exorcism, as Momo latches onto a train, meeting on the other end of the tracks Seiko Ayase, who creates a barrier on the railway to exorcise Turbo Granny and the Earthbound Spirit, releasing the spirits of murdered schoolgirls that were trapped inside the tunnel they were murdered in before. It turns out that Turbo Granny was misunderstood and had been trying to comfort the spirits of the girls who were murdered. The arc then ends with the patent DanDaDan after-arc feast, just like in One Piece. As well, Momo and Okarun grow closer together, as instead of telling Okarun goodbye, she says that she will see him tomorrow. Now, before we get into the Acrobatic Silky arc, I do want to remind everyone I made an essay on that scene from this arc with the Acrobatic Silky flashback sequence. If you want to watch it, you can click the card in the upper right. Acrobatic Silky primarily focuses on the introduction to God's gift on Earth, Aira, Shiratori, and her delusion of grandeur. That being, she is God's gift on Earth, as I just said. She's the bee's knees, the most beautiful and prettiest girl in her school and the entire globe. She's got pink hair, she's woefully undereducated on romance, and she watches her father stash. Of course, it's Aira Shiratori, right? Aira is basically the school's clown with the shoes to prove it. She's full of herself and arrogant, believing in Aira supremacy all of the way home. But she is able to control the narrative of who she is by having a clique who obey her every whim. Basically, they are her disciples, which, as an aside, I really like how Aira's character is almost biblical in this arc. She plays it up so seriously that Momo Ayase is a demon and is corrupting Kin Takakura, the eye of her fancy, that she continually is bested by Momo. It shows everyone just how truly incompetent she is. It's essentially a play on just being a sheltered child who got lucky because she won out on the Anime Gene Pool Award, and to others is seen as this mega beauty. But in reality, she is quite literally a dumbass. Aira is a great representation of what I think kids are like growing up. They are arrogant, full of themselves, and aren't able to see past their own shortcomings, which in the case of Aira is almost everything about her. However, there is a bit of a wrinkle in all of this that I think redeems Aira and goes a long way with the viewer. Growing up, she lost her mother, and because of this, she was raised by a single parent and thus didn't have the mother figure in her life to teach her the things a lady needs to know. In many ways, it is the opposite of Momo. When Momo lost her mother, Seiko was the mom to step up and answer her call. She didn't have to. She had already raised her mom, and her hips at that point were already just bags of hardened sand. And you gotta think at that point, they've kind of condensed and hardened into just like bone again. That works, right? Anyways, it is clear that the show, while clowning on Aira like Wendy beating up Cartman, Tatsu also reminds us that she is also a human who was shaped by the environment she grew up in, just like all of us. And while she unwittingly caresses Okarun's nut like it's some holy relic or message from God, going as far as to literally rub it in Momo's face too, which is kinda icky, Aira is just a regular girl who is missing a lot of skills, experience, and wisdom that she should have gotten through her mother. In other words, Aira feels incomplete as a person, yet this is what makes her complete. As a character, of course. She's annoying, she misunderstands boys, she doesn't even understand herself, and for the love of God, she desperately needs a lady figure in her life to show her the ropes because Dad's stash is probably not cutting it. But she is undeniably doing the best she can do given her circumstances. That's why I think Acrobatic Silky is such an important character and why some of the most hardcore DanDaDan fans will to this day say that the Acrobatic Silky arc is amongst the series' most treasured accomplishments. The Acrobatic Silky flashback ties a lot together and is primarily centered around the idea of a child losing a parent and the parent trying but failing to make ends meet, not realizing that simply by trying their hardest, they didn't let their child down because they were there for them in the first place. During the fight between Acrobatic Silky and the DanDaDans, we learn that Silky used to be a woman who worked multiple jobs and even sold herself on the streets to pay for her daughter's toys, schooling, and food. By all definitions, Silky was a supermom, and if you're not a jackass, you'd look past what she did to see how great she was not only as a mom, but as a human being too. Seriously, she became a sex worker to support her daughter. That's crazy. And this beautifully plays back into the themes of the first arc, which does not give into what things may seem like, but rather accept them for what they are. Which is also what Aira falls victim to by proclaiming Momo as a demon with literal demon wings to prove it, instead of just accepting that Momo is nice. Silky felt that she wasn't enough for her little girl because she struggled so hard to make ends meet. She felt that her sex work made her lesser than. Obviously it doesn't. She felt working multiple jobs made her less than. That also doesn't. And so she went all in on buying this cute little dress that cost so much just to make her daughter happy because she felt she wasn't providing enough for her in the first place. But by the end of her demise and the end of the flashback, we see that Silky died with a broken heart, which is what led her to become the Acrobatic Silky. Her restless soul, the fate of her daughter's tragic trafficking, and the weight of feeling lesser than gave her nothing left to live for. And through those negative and dark feelings, it gave birth to this yokai. Silky is quite literally the embodiment of the human struggle to be something more than, and missing the forest for the trees in the process. We see a photo collage of the times their family went on outings, their most happy moments, and despite the outlook of Silky personally, the perspective shift to us, the viewer, shows that she was actually the best mom and the right person for the job. She stayed and made sure to raise her daughter right, and she succeeded in that regard. But the negative thoughts drove her to do more than she ever even had to do in the first place. And of course, the societal pressures as well. It begs the question, did Silky ever have to go through all of that trouble in the first place? Her daughter would, no matter what, accept her and see her actions as they are, acts of love. I think there is a misconception with children that people usually think they're dumb and they can't understand human emotions well. I don't think that is the case. They actually don't understand the nuances well. And what her daughter saw in her really was just the simplicity of her actions, the core message, and what it meant. She didn't understand why, how, or the reasons, but she knew the intentions of the actions behind her mother. It was Silky who was essentially thinking for her daughter in these moments, thinking that she was disappointed in her for being who she was, not even realizing that she just loves her mom for who she is. That's the beauty and curse of perception. And so how this translates into Aira's character is that she learns from the memories of Silky what it is like to have a mother, and thus completes her character, filling in some of the missing blanks. Aira now has a mother in her life, and she is literally flowing through her body, giving her power. She didn't need some god to show her the way, she just needed her mom. Aira's perspective shift from here on out is actually really interesting to see, because while she still acts like her usual self, Aira becomes one of the most fascinating characters in the series, showing the complexities between perception and reality, the effects of parenting on children and society, and the ways children cope by adopting symbols in their life. As an example, kids usually pick Superman as their hero because that's who they see themselves as, a Superman. These are projections as a way to cope with their own reality. Aira chose God as her symbol to project herself onto because she feels as if this is how she can draw her power. This is what she needs as her mother figure to guide her, but not because she is religious. Aira is absolutely not religious, but because that is likely what was in her environment at the time. So don't get it twisted. Aira's story really isn't about religion. It is more about the inner workings of how children cope and the typical things they seek out to balance out the scales of their emotions and feelings when they go through tough moments in life. Did I mention this is one of the top 3 best arcs of DanDaDan? It is just the perfect writing for this arc and this character, and it all beautifully wraps it up pretty well.
Well, it was about that time that I noticed this Girl Scout was about 8 stories tall and was a crustacean from the planet Oregon.
Loch Ness Monster.
I said, damn it, monster! Get off my lawn! I ain't giving you no tree fitty!
The Serpo arc, on the other hand, may be short, but there is a lot to go over. Namely, Okarun at the very beginning gets one of his kintama, which is the Japanese word for testicles, back. How do they do it? Oh, you know, good old game of baseball and all that, but it seems that Okarun would be the one who was striking out, as upon misunderstanding the situation, Momo and Okarun form a rift between them after seeing Aira trying to confess to him at school. This plays throughout the arc as a form of tension, and also plays on the whole misunderstanding trope. Momo is too caught up in her own feelings for Okarun to see past the trees for the forest. This is because of her very strong bond with Okarun. And for Aira, she is also too oblivious to understand that Okarun clearly doesn't like her due to her massive ego and being, well, I guess the prettiest girl in the school. This shows that while Aira grew by a massive amount in the last arc, she doesn't change overnight. This highlights the stubbornness of her, but also the conviction of Aira, which for her is a double-edged sword. This plays upon her religious gift from God attitude, lampooning the self-absorbed teenage women and men in high school. This plays well with Momo and Aira's conflict, as Momo has a more genuine connection to Okarun through their trials of the previous arcs, showing how close they've grown in such a short amount of time. Where Aira is too caught up with herself and her importance to hold herself to such a high standard because of her mother's passing that she is quite literally coping by believing in religious delusions. In other words, this is all extremely short-sighted with both parties, but also highlights women's strongest points as well. I get the sense through moments like this that Tatsu really admires the complexity of women and the challenges they face, highlighting quite fairly some of the tropes of life while giving them enough grace to be understood and relatable all at the same time. But the drama doesn't last too long, as while in school, the Serpoians have returned to steal their banana organs, targeting Okarun to extract Turbo Granny's yokai powers. This leads to the Dover coming out of nowhere, singing an ABBA song of all things, and really just being a massive threat. But not until it is Aira Shiratori, the class blunder, who comes and saves her newfound friends. And in this moment, it is her delusions of being the chosen one that leads to her finding a newfound strength inside of her. As well, she is being given the power of the acrobatic Silky, who gives Aira the power of being guided by a mother through her strength. This is symbolically shown in her yokai form. One side of her face is covered by the skull of Silky, showing her fierceness, while the beautiful side of a woman, which is the face given to her by her mother. However, Momo as well is there to provide her strength, as her psychokinesis allows Okarun and Aira to fight back more effectively together. This is pretty interesting because if you think about it, Momo is the reason Aira is allowed to fight side by side with Okarun, proving that it isn't Okarun in this equation that is giving her strength. It is the aspects of each of them working in tandem. However, this fight then leads into the appearance of that goddamn Loch Ness Monster. But no, really. This fight was awesome because the Dover Demon and Nessy played polymerization for their turn to summon Serpo Dover Demon Nessy. Eventually, they do figure out that its ability is water-based and needs to recharge, with it being its most vulnerable outside the water because it needs it for its offense and defense. So Momo, being the best girl that she is, drains the water, which allows Okarun to defeat the Serpoians and drains their life points to 0. The aftermath, though, is interesting. After escaping empty space, they are caught in their underwear as, for reasons, they are all stripped during the Nessy and Dover Demon fight. Obviously, this was a bit of fan service to the fans, but was a nice symbolism of themselves laying it all bare to each other at that moment. The best example of this is when Okarun and Momo are finally able to tell each other how they feel.
I don't care if others get the wrong idea about what happened, but if it's you, I couldn't stand it. All that matters to me is that you understand.
Momo explains her frustrations with her misunderstanding of the situation. Why would he go with such a skank, her words not mine, when she is the one he made a promise to? Well, on the other hand, Okarun doesn't at all understand that she is going through this because she has failed to communicate that fact and just expects Okarun to understand her feelings intuitively. The reality is that neither of them can understand each other unless they actually put in that effort to learn to communicate. This is a big stepping stone in Momo and Okarun's relationship because it showed to them they must work together in good faith and not jump to conclusions, as it could end up tearing them apart before they're even together. The yokai and aliens in this instance were the symbolic forces of their obsessions coming to fruit and toxicity without them even realizing it. In other words, humans are social creatures, and without communication, we are rejecting one of the most needed aspects of our human evolution. On the other hand, Aira has a bit of a redemption here as she realizes the false rumors she had been spreading around school about Momo were false, owning up to it in front of her clique that surrounds her. This is a welcomed maturity of Aira's character that completes what I consider to be an ambitious dual-arc story focused around going into the inner workings of Aira. We see this again through the Dover demon, who is revealed to be sympathetic as he is just a father who is working to support his sick son. Seiko, the authority figure, shows the kids in this moment how to handle a situation like this, providing the Dover an entire cow as the blood of their race is like milk, and so this ends up solving their crisis, saving the family. This is a mirror of Aira's father and her own family dynamic. They were both in a crisis, and they both had unconventional but ultimately satisfying conclusions to what is to become one of DanDaDan's most important dumbasses. But just when you thought it was over, it just began. Momo's childhood friend and first crush, Gigi, arrives unexpectedly to ask for Seiko's help as Okarun faces his next internal struggle.
Momo kawaii.
The Cursed House arc, on the other hand, is a bit of a different arc. Namely, Okarun and Gigi are the characters that make it feel much different. Gigi in particular is a rather fascinating character, as he has seeked out the help of Seiko Ayase, as he can now see spirits after being haunted. And these spirits have driven his family into the hospital after suicide attempts. This is a great setup because it not only showcases the gravity and stakes of this next arc, which is Gigi's family weighing in the balance, but as well has multiple other layers of complexity to go along with it. Though, interestingly, Aira Shiratori is notably absent for this arc, as she suspects Momo is creating a conspiracy for, quote, gathering allies for the end of the world. This is, of course, just another delusion, but does hint further at Aira's suspicions of Momo having ulterior motives. Does she? Hell no, this girl's just a dumbass. But it is not just Aira with suspicions. Okarun has his own opinions about what Gigi's intentions are, and thus he feels insecure that already Gigi and Momo are so close. So even when Momo waves goodbye at him and promises to see her tomorrow, Okarun still feels something is off and his confidence is mildly shaken. This is when it is revealed that the flashback Momo described of her being ridiculed by the boy she liked was in reality Gigi. The twist here is that Gigi isn't coming back to use Momo or her family, but instead he shows up in humility, and even later on while washing dishes, spills to Momo that he regrets bullying her as a kid, because now he sees spirits and realized right then and there that he was wrong about her. Once again, a non-believer of sorts, if you want to use that word, now believes after seeing and, well, believing. The veil is off, and the thing that tore them apart is now the thing that brings them back together once again. This plays into the theme of believing as seeing and seemingly punishing characters who do not believe. So Seiko has decided that she will commission Momo, as Seiko's powers are limited to their local location and that one of Okarun's Kintama could be in the balance. However, at school, Okarun continues to be isolated as Gigi joins Momo's class, as he now begins to sulk and thinks that he is being replaced, especially after sharing Momo's favorite Pompey with her. But this is when Taro, the educational mannequin endowed with Okarun's shiny Kintama, appears out of nowhere, and this leads to a bit of a chase scene with Okarun, Momo, and Gigi tracking down Taro by having Momo crush his heart repeatedly. No doubt a clever nod to how Okarun feels right now, and how cruel and painful love can be to the heart of a man. And this also relates to Gigi, who did the exact same thing to Momo's heart as well. So they are able to find Taro, who was in love with a female model named Hana, as Okarun relates to Taro's feelings as Taro confesses his undying love to her. This is a revelation to Okarun's feelings, as he is now able to convey the way he feels about Momo. Momo isn't his friend per se, she is more than that to him. She is the girl he is in love with. And to compromise, Hana is staying at Seiko and Momo's home, while Taro stays at school visiting her every night, which Momo inevitably has to deal with. After having a nightmare, the trio of DanDaDans are then off to Gigi's home to exorcise the evil spirits. But not before Okarun begins to try and show Momo how impressive he is as a way to compete with Gigi, which Seiko puts a stop to because they're kicking up dust and Gigi gets decimated by Turbo Granny. Upon arriving at the village, Gigi explains that his father is researching the local volcano, which has been dormant for over 200 years. Inside Gigi's family home, Momo senses nothing, surmising it likely to be just weak energy, and thus opts to go to the natural hot springs. But there is an unseen threat. Villagers are watching them from the shadows, but they dismiss it as nothing. This leads into a moment where Gigi is teaching Okarun soccer while casually asking, "Do you like Momo?" which then ends in a fight over which of the two DanDaDans likes Momo more, as Okarun insists he just respects her. Pfft, yeah, okay. However, by the end of this scene, they end up noticing an extension to Gigi's home and break in through the walls to reveal a talisman-covered room. At the same time, Momo is hoping that Gigi and Okarun are bonding while she relaxes to only be assaulted by men claiming that it is a mixed bath. So, are you excited for DanDaDan Season 2? Catch up on my thoughts by watching my Season 1 reactions playlist and subscribe to my dedicated DanDaDan manga channel for up-to-date coverage of the manga. Make it a great day or not, the choice is ultimately yours.